Thank you for joining me. I want to just share a little bit about what the format is going to be tonight. I do have a PowerPoint, so I will be going through some of that, and then I'll also stop at different points so that hopefully we can open it up for discussion. Because there's enough on there, I'm not going to hear if just any one person's talking in the background, so we'll kind of just stop the sharing and then open it up at that point. I want to just say first off too that I have no expertise in any of the areas that I'm going to talk about, which seems very like it's chutzpahdik of me to even assume that I can bring anything to this. What I can bring is I can bring examples from Jewish tradition, examples of text, and that hopefully together on these sort of modern issues that we're confronting, that we will be able to develop an ethical language and some questions and Jewish values, so that when we're thinking about these things, that we have a little bit more of a framework to understand them within and make decisions. So that's what I'm hoping to bring. I'm sure that many of you have far more expertise in any one of these areas that I'm going to talk about for the next 3 weeks. I also want tonight, just before we start, to dedicate this tonight to the remaining hostages, and in the hopes we're seeing that there should be a deal very soon, and that we really hope that all of the remaining hostages will be able to return home in safety. So we'll be thinking about them as well. Okay, any questions or anything before I start sharing the PowerPoint?
I just want to say amen to that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Annie. Yes. Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm going to share my screen then so we can start. Okay, can we see this? All right. Okay, so this is our question for tonight. What does Judaism say about AI? And if you were intrigued at all, I'm just going to try and. Okay, I did mention that we're going to talk about matzah. So that is one of the examples that we're going to look for tonight. Let me just see. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at past Jewish responses to different technologies to try to understand if there is any guidance from the past about an appropriate Jewish response then to our question now about artificial intelligence. So we're going to look at these 3 examples because in each of these cases, as a community, we have had to make decisions about them and how we're going to use these rituals and ritual items. So the first one I want to just mention is Torah scrolls. We know that a Torah has to be written, that there's many different laws, halachot, around a Torah scroll, exactly how it has to be handwritten by a scribe. It has to be written with a feather. It has to be written with special ink. It has to be done on parchment. And there's literally a whole book that is going to tell us how to go about and how the scribe goes about actually handwriting a Torah scroll, so that it's being repeated over and over throughout the ages in the same kind of way that it's been done for a couple of thousand years or more. Now, this is very old technology. For the most part, what have we chosen to do though? We've chosen to stay with this old technology for the most part. And you see that in synagogues today, doesn't matter whether we're Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, we all choose to read from this very old scroll. So I want to just, first of all, we're going to just stop the sharing, but I want you to think about what are the advantages of having a ritual object that's being preserved in the same way for thousands of years? And what are the disadvantages? So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so the fact that we read from this ancient scroll every week, we take it out, it's a highlight of the service. What do we gain or what do we lose by doing this? You can unmute yourself and, yeah, if you want to speak.
I think that we gain by having the like a connection to prior generations and our ancestors. So we have the exact same experience. So we can serve that exact experience. But what do we lose? I guess we lose some time because it takes time to do all that and find our spot. It does sometimes we end up, talking amongst ourselves. But I think that's part of the experience. So I don't consider that a bad thing.
I think by bringing out something that's very old and that, even if it's a new Torah scroll, it's an old technology,
Yeah.
you're immediately signifying to everyone who's present that this is something important and you should pay attention at this time.
Okay, all right.
Disadvantage
Any other
would
comments?
A disadvantage would be we inherit the problems of the past, meaning if the ink didn't last and the parchment dried out and all those things. So things that we could have corrected with improved technology, we've chosen not to. So there's
Okay.
a disadvantage. You inherit the previous shortcomings of the old technology.
Okay, good.
The sharing of the teachings in the scroll are much more cumbersome than if you were to do it in a book. And teaching, for example, we don't teach our kids right out of the scroll. We teach our kids out of a tikkun or some sort of other more modern technology. And today, obviously, we can do it through the internet, right? So we can have a Zoom class for a B'nai Mitzvah kid on the internet without even so much as photocopying a page of Torah. And so that's a drawback in that we can't use the Torah on a daily basis to teach and study from the way we might have back in the day.
Okay, absolutely. So what we're seeing here is that there are advantages and disadvantages to maintaining, or staying with old technology, but that there are some real reasons to do it, that there is an emotional power that we could choose to stay with an old technology. Okay, I'm going to go back to screen sharing again. Okay, just to put this, we've all heard of Safaria, and Safaria has launched this first ever digital Torah writing project. I don't know how many people have seen it, where you can choose for a certain amount of money to choose a font, a style of the letter and that you want to write in it. So they're actually taking some of the ideas from the a Torah writing project, and they're doing it in digital form. So I'm just saying that even some of the ways that we've treated the Torah scroll, that these are now being put into a different format. And so people are excited about choosing a font and a letter and that to write in this digital format. Okay, I want to move to another technology because I want to just get these ideas out there, like these examples. So the next example we're going to look at is the matzah machine. So in the mid 1800s, the technology came about in Austria that they could make matzah with a machine, and it split the Jewish community. So I brought some of the arguments for each side. So Solomon Kluger of Brody. So these were arguments for why they should not use this new technology. So the advent of the machine would deny poor bakers to earn money for their Pesach needs by eliminating jobs. So eliminating jobs is always one of the concerns, and definitely a Jewish value to think about whenever a new technology comes along. Joseph Saul Nathanson of Lemberg was one that was saying we should try this new technology, we should be using it. And he basically, in contrast to the argument for losing jobs, he says, well, you're holding a double standard. We've already accepted the printing press, and poor scribes have lost their jobs. And so, you know, this is just another example of what's going to happen. Solomon Kluger comes back and says, well, yes, but now there's going to be dough caught in the machine. It would leaven itself, it would rise, and therefore all of the matzah would be treif. We wouldn't be able to use it. The argument back is, well, machine will be cleaned regularly, and it's even more efficient than human-made matzah. And then the argument for against it again was, well, the presence of an adult is required. We need a human being to watch this process, to be the shomer, because we have to make sure that the matzah is made from the beginning to the end of the process in 18 minutes or less. So this requirement of a human being. And the argument back is, you know, well, an adult presence is necessary to activate a machine anyway. So we had this then argument, as I said, that went on for years and years in the Jewish community. And we know that now most of the matzah that we eat for Pesach is a machine-made matzah. If you want to get shmura matzah, which is made by hand, in other words, maintain that old tradition, then you are paying many, many more times the price of it. So think about what this technology did do, that it was chosen, that there were advantages, that it could be, you know, the same shape, it could be made quicker, it could be boxed, it could be sent to other places and maintain its shape. Unlike shmur matzah, if you bought it and you end up with a lot of pieces to it. So there were advantages and disadvantages again, but noticing that, you know, the presence or the need for human beings was an important part of the argument, and jobs. So again, we can ask, you know, and I'm not going to stop the PowerPoint at this point, but just to think about what are the advantages or disadvantages then of the matzah machine. And then I put this up here, the electric Chanukia, and I noticed that even at Kol Ami that we have had to change the name of our Hanukkah celebration. So instead of it being the night of 1,000 candles, we now call it the night of 1,000 lights. Well, again, electricity, this was new technology. So when Edison invented the commercial light bulb, there was a question that arose about whether or not you could use an electric Chanukia. And they actually, in that question, came back to a previous century's question that the Maharal of Prague in the 16th century had to answer. And the question then was about whether or not it was okay to use wax candles in the Chanukia, which is what most of us use to this day as we use wax candles. Why was that even a discussion? Well, there's a text here from the Talmud from Shabbat 23a. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, all the oils are suitable for the Hanukkah lamp, and olive oil is the highest quality of the oils. The most preferable way to fulfill one's obligation to light the menorah is with olive oil. Abaya said, at first, the master, Rabbi, used to seek poppy seed oil, saying the light of this lasts longer. But when he heard this dictum of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, he was particular for olive oil, saying this yields a clearer light. So again, the question came up about whether or not it was okay to use wax candles, given that in the Talmud, they stress the importance of using oil. And we know that that's the original story is that the oil lasted in the Beit HaMikdash in the temple in Jerusalem. So just going to wax candles was new technology. So then the question came up with the invention of the light bulb. And so Rabbi Yosef Messas, the former Sephardic chief rabbi of Haifa, permitted the use of an electric menorah to fill one's obligation. So he said, this is fine, in the same way that previous they said yes to wax candles, yes to the electric menorah. Other rabbinic authorities permitted in situations where one has no other alternative. So the most common situations occur in hospitals, hotels, when you're traveling, you know, in an airplane, on a boat kind of thing. And we know that at Kol Ami, that the building does not want us to use candles. And so we've gone to our Night of 1,000 Lights. So I bring all of these examples. I'm going to stop sharing this in a second so that we can sort of ask this question. Is AI the same as these earlier technologies, or is it a matter of degree or kind? Like, so I'm going to stop sharing, right? Can we use these examples of the past to help inform a discussion around AI? In other words, is it just on that same kind of continuum? Or when you think about AI, is it something that is so different? So to give you an example, if a farmer is working the field and they, working towards more and more food to harvest, and they come up with a technology that 10% more produce is harvested at the end of the season, we would say that the technology that they've used, the new way of doing it, is several degrees better than the old technology, 10% greater yield. If all of a sudden there was 100% greater yield, is that degree or is that a different kind of technology? So what is happening here?
I think you're talking about two different things, to be honest with you. I think you're talking about the advancement of technology to make our lives better, which I think is a fair statement. But I think with AI, I think there's something that's not involved in the previous examples, which is this idea of intellectual property that is being scraped across the internet and being to create other sort of bots, all sorts of ways. They're taking things that have been already created by other people and using them for their own gain. And I think those are two separate things. I think we can talk about the advancement of technology to better our lives, and then have the conversation about whether or not this
Are you
is.
talking about people getting the financial remuneration for their work?
Well, there is that too, yeah. But I think that, for example, if I write a book and AI comes along and scrapes the book and uses my intellectual property in order to create something else, that's a problem, isn't it? I mean, isn't that a Judaic problem? We're talking about theft, aren't we? On a very high level. So you can build on other people's ideas as long as you acknowledge other people's ideas.
Exactly. Okay, so we were going to get into that, the whole concept of, yes, attribution and how that's done. And yes, that's definitely a value that we need to consider. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, can I say something? Or
Yeah.
sorry. Also, is a lot of the AI tools that have been created or are used are not necessarily for man's betterment. They might be for convenience. I can't say that a lot of students are necessarily bettering their learning, their knowledge, etc., when they're more simply plagiarizing, taking work, doing things, checking it. I really don't know where things are going to end up in our society and what are the skills they're going to need. I don't know. Maybe these are those skills. But AI has such a far-reaching area. So much of it is being used in the medical world and in other worlds to enhance our lives and do things that can better diagnose and do things.
Mhm.
But there's so many areas where it is not, and where it is being used, as Dawn said, it's built on other people's ideas, and yes, we get into the whole thing of who owns the work, where did it come from, and also, is that better for humans to now no longer have to think about a lot of these things and to not know how to do some of these things anymore? So
Actually, just in terms of attributing or acknowledging the ownership of something, in Judaism, there is a concept of B'Shem Amro, in the name of the person that said it. And so, if we think about it, like if I give a Devar Torah, I'm supposed to sort of, this is a text, this is the rabbi that said it. And sometimes we find out even in Jewish texts, it will be say, Rabbi so-and-so in the name of Rabbi so-and-so in the name of Rabbi so-and-so. In other words, really taking to quite the extent the idea that this person was the originator of that idea. But what we've seen is also that's changed over the years, so that probably very few people would sort of acknowledge, well, I Googled this and found these ideas, because they might not even been attributed, but it may be true that you even get those ideas by Googling, which is sort of something different. Again, we're using technology and it sort of becomes so common that probably few people would say, I've Googled this. Like, okay, so let's, any last comments before we go back to the PowerPoint? And we're not going to answer all these questions tonight. I mean, it's just, the idea is also to raise, our thoughts around some of them. Okay, I'll go back to the PowerPoint then. Okay, so now what does Judaism say about AI now that we've looked at these examples? So I have to tell you that I actually went into ChatGPT and I asked the question about whether or not, Jewish people or Judaism should accept AI. So I asked AI the question, and because I wanted to see what arguments they, ChatGPT, would come up with in terms of using itself. So I'm not going to go through the whole answer. I can share this PowerPoint with you later, just if you want to see. I'm sure you could put it also in and get something very similar. But I did bold some of these just to go through. So when examining Jewish values, it is apparent that the issue of AI is multifaceted, with both positive and negative aspects to consider. So this is absolutely true. And like any technology, it can be used for good, it can be used for evil. We know that. So the question is going to be, how do we make sure that it's more likely to be used for good? I can also share with you that on any of the issues that we're going to talk about tonight or the next 2 weeks, there is not one Jewish idea about it. It's not like there is a consensus across the Jewish community, in the same way that there was arguments for 50 years about the matzah machine. There continue to be arguments in the Jewish community over any of these issues. So there's no definitive Jewish position. What else did ChatGPT give? Well, that Jewish values, the Torah emphasizes the importance of ethical behavior, social responsibility, the value of human life. So we did see actually some of these come up in previous examples: social responsibility, jobs, the value of human life, the value of a human doing part of the technology. And we see that they mentioned pikuach nefesh, saving a life. Somebody just mentioned how, for diagnosing things, that AI is becoming quite proficient at some of those things and able to do things much quicker, go through much more material. So there is an argument to be made for enhancing well-being and saving lives. Talking about promoting justice and fairness, it can, but we also know, and I just was interested too, that it comes up with the Jewish values, tzedek and tikkun olam. I just did this for fun. And the one of the things it ends with at the end is that, you know, we can't do anything to devalue the dignity of human labor and work itself, that we are commanded. People always think about Shabbat as their day off. We're supposed to rest on Shabbat, but they actually don't think about it from the other point of view, and that is that we are actually commanded to work 6 days a week. And then the ethical concerns for the potential for AI to use algorithms that are not correct, using data that is biased, using data that is incorrect, and so thereby promoting biases and injustices. And the fact that it can be used for malevolent purposes, that could be used for invading privacy, surveillance, we know fraud, you know, weaponry. So we know, again, it comes back to, like any technology, it can be used for good or bad. This seems to lend itself to even worse consequences if it were to go awry. Okay, so, I'm going to stop that for a second. Okay, I just did that for fun because I wanted to see what ChatGPT would come up with. And it does come up with, interesting enough, many of the same arguments that we would come up with in the previous technologies for or against its use. Any comments about that, first of all, before we go on?
I have a question for you, actually. As
Okay.
a rabbi looking at what ChatGPT, spit out, I suppose. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not great yet. We know that. And it still has a long way to go, and it will improve. There's no question that it will. But what did you think of the answers as a rabbinic source? What did you think of what it came up with?
Well, that was a one-time deal. I did not go back and sort of say, change this voice, look for this, because I know that, like, my son, who uses it now for a number of things, he goes back and he refines it over and over again and use this kind of a voice and bring in this perspective or whatever. This was just a one-shot deal. Like, this was just one question. This was the answer. So on the basis of that, without anything else, I actually thought it did a decent job. That it did raise many of the things that I myself would say, social justice, pekuach nefesh, tikkun olam. Like, the fact is that it did grab those Jewish values that I would, if I had to make a list of, let's think about these, values, they would be on my list right off the bat. So in that way, for a first shot, I mean, it did bring out a number of the things that are important to discuss. It didn't bring out everything that I would hope to get into, but that's what I say. I just did it as a one-time deal. That's what I got after, 15 seconds. Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll go back to sharing then. Okay. What I think
Rabbi, we can't see, it's not shared.
Oh, it's not sharing. Okay, just a second then. Okay. I think that a lot of the questions that we need to ask is not so much about is this information correct? Because that can be refined over and over in time, as I just mentioned with that particular question that I put into it. But AI does confront us with questions about what it does mean to be human. What is it about humanity that we need to protect? And in what situations does it matter that a human is involved? I think that these are essential Jewish and, I mean, human questions for all of us to consider, because technology is advancing much, much faster. So where do we not want technology to be in our lives, and where do we want it to be? What is it about, you know, human beings? What is it about, you know, contact between people that's important? I'm going to just stop sharing that for a second. When I think of just even the format we're on right now, we are on this Zoom that really came about in, you know, in its popular way during COVID. It was necessary for people to be able to do this. What I was astounded to hear is that, and I can't quote even where the research was, but they did some research to see about people's first impressions about other people and how different they were on Zoom, like if you're seeing somebody on a screen, and what judgments about their character you would make versus meeting that person physically, being in the same room together. And for first impressions, there was not a lot of difference, which amazed me, because I'm a person that I really believe strongly that we should have interactions, you know, physical interactions with each other. And this is a format that is very, very practical, useful. We can all participate in far more things than we could ever go out and physically do. But I always thought it was very limited in terms of the engagement you could have with other people. But what we're starting to see is maybe not as much, not as much of a problem as what I had thought it would be. So, okay, any other comments?
I wonder if the quote research of that is colored by what people expect to get out of an interaction. And if the expectation is less than it was in previous times, then then Zoom would may be able to satisfy it. But it you know, things like saying that you get the same feelings and information out of it, just it that bothers me in the sense that I'm not sure how you measure that. And
it wasn't so much feelings, it was a sort of a judgment about character and character traits and what they could learn about the person.
And the question
It was a little bit more objective than just how did I feel about that interaction.
But even
I can't tell you the study.
I know, but it depends on, a lot of it depends on how you go about it, and whether or not the subjects were people who were used to just doing it over the internet or the other way, or people who were very used to using technology. Because remember, Zoom is newer, but there's always been the ability to hold conferences over long distances for quite a long time. And so some people would be very used to that. The only thing I found when I was working was that if somebody sent an email or somebody sent a memo or if you went and talked to the person, the interaction was way better. So Zoom is a giant step beyond memos and emails. And so that is helpful. But whether it's as good as being physically in the same room with a person, I have real problems thinking that that's correct. Whether the thing says
no, it wasn't as good as, it was sort of making judgments about somebody's characteristic, and so that's why I say it was a little bit more objective than that, and that people could tell people's characteristics as clearly almost on Zoom as if they met them in person, like in evaluating them. So okay, I'll go back to sharing the screen again then. Okay, there was a podcast, and I've given the link here, and if you want to have a copy of this presentation after and follow up this link, you can. And it was a podcast based on this question: can Chat GPT replace my rabbi? And so I want to just, I sort of listened to it, and I was quite amazed and about how they broke it down. And a lot of it came down to, well, what are the roles of a rabbi? And we could say, what are the roles of a teacher that could be replaced by AI? What are the roles of a doctor that could be replaced by AI? And so I'm using, myself then as a rabbi as an example of this, right? If these are sort of different roles, that a rabbi can take. Now, there might be more that you could say fundraising, you could say, committee leadership, etc. But looking at these sort of 6 areas, right? What roles could be replaced by AI and what could not be? So just looking at this, I'll give you a second to think about it. And then we'll just have a discussion about which things you think yes or no. Okay, so you saw that list, and as I say, we could use similar lists for other professions and that as well. So what do you think? Think about the first category. It was just like the information role, going to the rabbi. I ask a question about kashrut. I want to ask a question about naming my child. Can that role be filled by AI?
Well, they always say, if you have 2 rabbis, you have 3 opinions. So, I mean, AI is going to be just one more opinion, and every rabbi is going to have their own advice and their own information about what's halakha or what isn't, and what's, this or that advice. So in that first category, I think, like I said, you're going to have just one more opinion. Now, you, at the beginning, you said you tried to get the AI to answer your question. You said it was pretty clear, but that's on a sort of a just one question, one fact, or one not so fact. And I think in that case, maybe it can work. But I think for all the other 5, if I can just jump to that next thing, I think the other 5 all need the human element for all different reasons.
Okay, anybody else? Sylvia?
Yeah, I feel like none of them, for me, would be replaced by the human connection that I would look for a rabbi. If not, I would just use information, Google, ChatGPT. But that's not what I look for in a rabbi. I look for that human and relational, and the nuances that you could discuss and share, not just information, but share your soul, like something bigger than information. Like, I think for me, ChatGPT could enhance things. It could give you your basic information. And then there's all the complexity of what it means in relationships and how we relate to each other that, to me, never replace the human person.
Okay, all right. Anybody else?
I think that it's a tool. It's yet another tool in the long list of tools that everybody has. It's like Safaria and looking at Torah study. But there's a reason why in Torah study, you don't do it alone for the most part. You always do it with someone so that you get different nuances and different ideas. And even though the tool tells you some things, it doesn't tell you everything. And no matter how good ChatGPT, no matter how good a person is, there's always another opinion. There's always another idea. Things like pastoral care, you need a person. It's the personal touch that makes a huge difference in pastoral care. The fact that you go to the person, you talk to the person, you see what they're feeling, you see what they're under, and get an understanding, and you're there. Just the fact that you're there is very important.
Okay, so just present, physical presence. Okay. Annie or Ed, I'm not sure who's.
Yeah, I thank you, Rabbi. No, I think it can, to a certain degree, replace. Well, it's a tool, like David says, and I think a rabbi can be a lot more efficient. Say, if you're writing a sermon, to start off by using something like Chat GPT, and it may even be that it gets to a point where artificial intelligence can help with, say, pastoral care, where you make a phone call rather than visiting a person in person, and maybe very effective way to manage that. So I agree it's a tool, but more and more as artificial intelligence gets more sophisticated and more human, we might be surprised by how much it could replace a human.
I'm going to be the contrarian. Sorry, it's kind of my lot in life.
Get to know you, Dawn.
I know, you know, cynicism is my brand. All of those things you put up, sorry, Rabbi, you can be replaced. And every single one of those things, whether you want it or not, that's a whole other story. If you choose to have the human touch and you want a rabbi to come and visit you in your hospital bed, absolutely, you should be able to have that. But that wasn't the question. The question was whether or not AI can replace the rabbi in all of these things. And the answer is yes. The rabbi can be replaced. Anybody can be replaced by what we are now viewing as AI. And I'll give you a couple of really good examples pastorally. My husband's mother passed away during the pandemic. There was no Shiva to speak of other than online. Okay? It replaced what we know of as the human touch, because it was the only touch that he could have during those lockdowns. So
Was there something that was lost in that experience, though?
So what was lost was the fact that he couldn't be with his brothers. But whether or not he wanted hundreds of people showing up at the house, he's not that kind of person on a regular basis. He likes smaller groups. He's much more of an introvert. So for him, it wasn't ideal, but it certainly worked. We found a way through the sadness to get something that worked. I'm not saying it's ideal for everybody, and I'm certainly not saying everybody should go for it. I'm saying it works, and it works for some people. And what AI does is it offers choice. And if the question was, can your rabbi be replaced by AI? In every one of those situations, I could come up with a scenario where the rabbi could be replaced by AI. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, don't say sorry.
Type of business.
Okay, maybe the question is not so much can it, would you want AI to replace? Maybe, I don't know, or can we even conceive of what AI might be in 5 years or 10 years from now? We don't know. Okay, anybody else?
I would just say almost not quite the opposite, because Dawn's got her arguments very well thought out. I don't have mine very well thought out. I just can't see, maybe I'm too old, I just can't see losing that physical human part of it to AI. I'm a kindergarten teacher, and I know that when you try and teach small children, for them to pay attention to a person, it's a heck of a lot more easier to do that than have them watching. You know, I heard that in COVID, the older kids could manage with homework and things like that, but the younger kids couldn't even pay attention to whoever was supposed to be controlling the class. I just think there's some conditions or some positions where AI, we're not ready for that kind of thing for AI yet. I think there's still a heck of a lot of room for the human touch. I mean, my husband had his 80th birthday on Zoom, and you saw mine, and I'd rather have mine than 80 people on Zoom. You know, I'm sorry, I just have a hard time with it. but I haven't got my examples as well worked out as Dawn.
No, that was beautiful, Renelle. That's fine. That's,
Yeah, I
thank you,
think,
Jeanette.
yeah, I think there's not much comfort from a machine. Even on Zoom, well, of course it was numbed. It was a much less real experience. You still know that it's a real human on the other side, even if you had never met them before in theory, but you take comfort in speaking to people, you take comfort. I'm not sure how much comfort I can get from a box, like from someone I don't know. And you could say, well, you talk to a therapist that you just met, but that's a real human, and it's a real human. And maybe it will take time for people to get used to talking about, because I've seen that question raised with therapy, like, can therapy be done in the same way?
Yeah.
It makes you reflect on your own, but I do think that I'm not sure, like, just how do you get comfort from an intelligence as opposed to a human with a beating heart? I don't know.
I wonder, as our young people grow up with this more and more, will they learn that this is the way it is and there isn't something different, and these things will be bred out of them, if you will, and they have the same need for that real person and for that. Already, I've had numerous friends who've told me that their teenage sons in grades 11 and 12, it's a Saturday night and they'll say, what are you doing? Oh, I'm getting together with my friends. Where? Oh, well, we're all in our own houses. It's just that we're all playing online or doing this and whatever it is. They don't even get together half the time anymore. I mean, it's very different. Even though the kids were all thrilled to come back and see each other after COVID, but that's because they had grown up by seeing each other. I'm just curious. I mean, who knows where it's going to end up, but things are changing. I mean, 1 and 2 year olds now know how to swipe phones and do things, and it's a different world, and it's
I
keeping
also
going.
agree with Dawn around making things accessible. And I think online is not accessible to people who don't have money, who don't have internet, who don't have working computers, who don't know how to use computers, and I think there's a whole community that we need to make sure are included in how we provide either services or information and socialize. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that there has been research, and older people in long-term care retirement home have died out of isolation, and Zoom did not do anything for them.
No,
So
it's
I
terrible.
think there has to be a combination, because I do think if you're sick and you can't participate, Zoom is wonderful, and but I don't think it does at this point probably in our life, gonna really replace that human connection that I think we still need. And I think there's gonna be a definite fall, like something's gonna happen in 5 years. I think COVID, post-traumatic stress is gonna be in our DSM, and it's just there's been a lot of trauma around COVID.
Yeah. I have a question. When we talk about AI, for example, with pastoral care, what does that mean? That it's like a robocall to someone who's just lost someone? Is that what we're talking about?
It could be that, but I mean, I remember seeing a program, and this was already probably a few years ago, that in Japan, that there was actually these like hologram people that they could have in their apartment, somebody that's lonely, not married or anything. They come home from work, and this hologram would start to talk to them, and sort of would move and sort of not touch because it's hologram, but would react and respond and talk to the person. So I mean,
Sorry.
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, the same thing exists now. There are, unfortunately, usually more men than women who now have a virtual girlfriend, basically.
Yeah.
And so they speak to and this avatar or whatever it is available all the time, and they can come home and they can talk to it and they can do things, and they text it. So they're sending messages all day. They receive from this their little answers and their little responses. Oh, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just at work. Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Like, and as the AI bot gets to know them better, it can preempt and it can send the messages and do all those things. So it's acting in every which way as if they have a girlfriend or have somebody with them, except for that physical touch. But beyond that, they're getting the little messages every day that they want to get, and they're
And
hearing, they're
except
getting to talk to someone.
probably this avatar doesn't have a fight with them.
Yeah, probably.
So then, what was that movie that came out like back in the 60s or something, the Stepford Wives or something like that? It was just like programmed just to play a particular role. I mean, if you think then about Jewish values, and if you go back to the beginning of Breshit and the creation of human beings, and there was the creation of the Adam, the male, and then there was the creation of the female that was to be kenegdo. And kenegdo in Hebrew is it's opposite. And so there's actually this sense built into Breshit that it's a couple that it's not that they always have to agree. They're actually supposed to hold a mirror up to each other in some ways to disagree. And that's a value, right? We know that disagreements are a value in Judaism. So this idea of having this avatar that is sort of like only doing what you would want it to do all the time, I think diminishes a human being. Like if that's what it like diminishes the concept of being human.
I think that AI can be a force for good. And I'm thinking back to a book I read in the last couple of years called, I think it was by Frank Herbert, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And it's about a human colony in the future on the moon. And they rebel because they're being oppressed by Earth. And the leader becomes basically a guy named Mike, who's actually a computer generated personality with an actual physical face, and helps to the computer seems to generate its own personality and actually takes the side of the rebels and does good. So who knows, maybe in the future AI could be a force for good. And this was predicted back in the
I think it is going to be in many ways a force for good. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be, but
Yeah, just say.
Also, the only other thing I was going to say is I don't see Zoom as artificial intelligence.
No.
It may be a communications vehicle for artificial intelligence, but Zoom is really just another way to communicate, like a phone, TV, etc.
okay. Okay, I'm going to follow up, Sylvia, on something that you said about the sort of combination and in therapy, because I'm actually going to bring, let's see, oops, yeah. Yeah. My bar is gone here. I want to share again. Yeah, sorry. There's some, oh, there, okay. Okay. Okay, this is an example I brought here. This is a study from Hebrew University Psychology Department. Explores the evolving role of AI in mental health therapy, emphasizing the irreplaceable importance of human empathy. Led by this Professor Perry, the research highlights the potential for a hybrid model where AI supports therapeutic processes without replacing the essential human connection required for emotional engagement and genuine care. And they came up with this, while AI can simulate empathic responses and assist in tasks like patient intake and routine evaluations, The study underscores that true empathy, emotional resonance, and authentic concern remains unique to human therapists. True empathy involves emotional engagement and genuine care, which AI simply cannot replicate. The proposed model envisions AI enhancing therapy, accessibility, and efficiency while preserving the human touch in deeper emotional interactions. This balance aims to leverage technology without undermining the critical relational aspects of therapy. So just sort of what you were saying, Sylvia, in terms of this sort of like, hybrid approach where AI can be very useful in some aspects, but not to completely replace that, relational empathic response that humans can do. So I don't know, John, how you feel about that sort of hybrid approach.
Actually, to be fair, for therapy, I think I need a person. I mean, I wasn't suggesting you don't need a person for many of these things. I'm just not saying you need somebody in person all the time. And I think that's a very big difference. And I think that the pandemic showed us that you don't always have to be in person to get value out of an interaction, which is, I think, what you were saying about Zoom, right? That people got, they got a very good sense of somebody, even through the little box that we're looking at, right? But for therapy, I want to know that there's a real person on the other end of that conversation, and not just something that's spitting out other people's ideas. But that, again, it doesn't have to be in person. It can be on screen.
Well, that was certainly what Ed's point was. Yeah, that this is a communication tool versus, that we're all still real people talking to each other. At least I hope that's the case. I know I've seen all of you in person, so I know you exist.
and you know what? It's going to get to a point where we may not know. And that is terribly frightening, that we may not know who we're talking to, if those people are real. I think of problem solving, like I have a bill problem at the bank or something, and am I talking to a real person on the other end of the phone? Right now, it doesn't matter. That person's just spewing out canned lines anyway. So replacing that person with AI is very simple, and we're not going to know whether or not that person exists on the other end of the line.
Okay. I still can tell, and I get very angry and hang up lots of times. I don't get a person. But it's interesting. I mean, like, okay, the example with the therapy and this sort of hybrid approach, but there was something else that came out in Israel I read about this week, and that there is this man, he was a journalist for Channel 12, very well-known journalist in Israel named Nussbaum. And he was diagnosed a couple of years ago with ALS, and he lost his ability to speak, but he's still able to think and wants to work. So they fed all of his previous work into AI so that AI could learn his voice and his way of looking at things. And now he's back on TV again with this AI generation of his own voice, where he's working with the AI with his ideas and that, but the AI is actually able to literally give him back his voice. And it is his voice that's been learned. So I think that, in that way, how incredible that is, that this talented, well-respected journalist is able to continue working. But then also, John, you mentioned about, on the phone, look at the fraud that's already taking place, especially in the elderly community, where they think they're speaking to a family member, or, so again, AI learning voices can have its beneficial, effects and its evil,
Well, the whole actors strike that went on in the whole film world, part of one of the largest issues that they had was that the companies wanted to take their images and then to be able to use them with AI at any point they wanted. So you don't have to pay the actor anymore. You now have their image, and they wanted to be able to legally use those images, and they could actually generate them acting on the screen, in which case they could make them do what they wanted them to do without the actor's permission, and they didn't have to pay them. And so that's what a lot of the strike was about. And again, scary. I mean, the gentleman you just mentioned, he wanted to have the A do that. It was for him. These are people that the companies want to take their images without their permission and do things with them.
Right, which comes back to sort of intellectual property, physical property, and who owns what. Yes. Yeah.
You know what, it makes me, we're talking about this, makes me worry that when we talk about the evil, you can get a situation where, say, once Donald Trump dies, they do an AI version of Trump and keep that whole movement going, same as with Hitlerism, right? I mean, you could create a artificial intelligent version of Hitler because people are still, there's still people that still worship him.
And I think, yeah, what I think Don just said about how at one point is it going to be so sophisticated that we won't know who is human and who is not, and how do we preserve as much of being human as we can and safeguard that? Like, that's going to be incredibly, more difficult. So now the discussion, is it a difference in degree or difference in kind that we're talking about, or do we even know yet?
Oh, we're at the beginning.
Yeah.
This is, even though it has moved very quickly, this is still very new. And we haven't seen even close to what this is capable of. And that should scare us, but it should thrill us at the same time. There's a lot of really positive things that this can do. Sharon talked about medical advancements, which I think are huge. But the fraud capabilities, the ability to change perspectives and minds and conversations through misinformation and disinformation. We're seeing it in election interference all over the world, not just in the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And we have to become far more critical consumers of information. We have to learn how to recognize what we're being fed and say to ourselves, this seems weird. This doesn't seem like the whole world should not be against one person and for the other person. It doesn't jive. I had you mentioned the elderly. My parents have been scammed several times. And one of the scams was frighteningly real in that they had my mother's social insurance number, they had all sorts of things, and my father could not recognize the scam and was ready to give over his bank numbers. So that's people who have no idea what they're dealing with. The people on this call are sort of in the middle, and our kids and grandkids will have hopefully better tools to deal with it than we will. And maybe
I think our kids are more trusting than we are. I don't think the kids, like, they just take the first answer they see for anything and they just say, okay, I finished it, it's done. I don't think they have the judgment yet. I don't think they have the maturity yet to know, to even look and to care, if you will. Like it's like they say that under 16 years old, the human brain doesn't generally have the ability to think into the future very well. So it's all about what I want to do right now and not what's right and what would be there later. So that's a difficult stage for them. I mean, by the time then they get to their 20s or things, hopefully, yes, they'll be further ahead than we are. But I don't know. Like they're growing up in a different world. I don't know what it's going to be like. That's scary.
And even the algorithms, I mean, that we all are, we're all subject to them now. It doesn't matter where we are. Like, I worry about the fact that every time we go to look for something, we get more of the same, whether it's on my Kindle reader, and what they recommend, or when I'm looking for something about news. I mean, it's just more and more is fed to you of the same of what you've already got. And so how do you then really begin to figure out, what is
Yeah, it's time to start looking at places that you aren't used to looking. And
Yeah.
I think that's really the key. If you are used to reading a newspaper that you've been reading for 15 years, the chances are that newspaper is owned by a conglomerate that owns 40 or 50 others that are just basically churning out the same stuff. You have to be a critical consumer of information, and that's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard and it takes effort and it takes a lot of work that most of us don't want to put
We
in.
don't have the time. I mean, how do you have the time even?
We don't have the time. That's the point. But at the same time, we have an election coming up. We have several elections coming up in Ontario, and we cannot be manipulated by algorithms that want us angry, that want us fighting against each other. And that's what the news is doing to us right now. It's making us all very sick and very angry. So we have to become far more informed in our own way, rather than what you were just talking about, reading the same stuff over and over and over again.
But do people even know how to do that?
No.
No. I mean, even I'm sitting here listening to you and going, you're right, that's absolutely true. I wouldn't even know the first place to look beyond the things that I normally do, you know? So it's,
I'm going to say get off of social media for your
yeah,
news. Do
yeah,
not trust social media for your news.
yeah.
And that's the first place you should start. Okay. And then you can go find other news sources. But anything that is Facebook, all that kind of stuff, that is not a news source.
No, it's
So
all inundated. It's also inundated by all the bots and the things that are putting out, um, yeah, information that they want out there, and yeah.
So are we going to be looking at new ways of teaching so that we get all this taught or not, yes, taught to the children, taught to the teenagers who are uninformed?
Yeah, you're in a different field, Sharon, in terms of your at least working in a more creative field. But what
Yeah.
are people saying at chat? What is that chat? What are they saying there about?
So chat, not chat GPT.
Yeah.
Chat is really has been pushing AI since the day that it started. And they have been trying to have all our PD sessions revolve around AI. They always have like new practices and things. There's a really cool feature, by the way. You can have AI read anything and make it a podcast. And for a lot of kids and for a lot of people, that's actually a very interesting way to learn something or to read it, to have it said to you as if it's a podcast. And it makes it's scarily accurate. It can take whatever it sees and it turns it into like a little new, anyway, there are some really cool features that can allow people to learn in ways, especially those kids who've got modifications and have needs and things like that. But again, it comes back to what Don was saying too. Where's the critical thinking? How do you let kids know what is real, what is the right thing, and all of that? So many of the courses, like the English courses, almost everything in English now that's being evaluated has to be evaluated paper and pencil in classroom. Otherwise, who knows whose work it is? And that's happening more. Math, it's wonderful as a tool because kids can go and at home they can get help. They can have it answer the questions for them. They can have it make questions for them. They can do all the practice, but that's because the evaluation is done on paper in class again. So you can still actually see if they've learned anything.
So back to the really old technology for evaluation.
Yeah, but in my class, since I'm teaching computer things, it's very hard to evaluate what they can do on a computer without the computer. But there are other things, and I've considered. I mean, I don't even know if I'm going back to work. I haven't decided yet. But it's I've considered it too. So then use all the tools, do something really creative. But I'm not going to test you on the computer. Then I am going to go back to you show me. I've got to have them show me somehow that they know how to use the things, and then answer more questions about the theory behind the design and the other parts of the design, and why did you create this, and is the message really there, and all those things. I don't know. It's tricky. It's very tricky. And I also get so surprised at how many kids do not know how to use technology. Blows my mind. Like there's kids who, beyond turning on the computer, I don't think they know what to do. They would know how to text someone. They know how to get their friend to do things, but I'm not sure, you know, and then there's those kids. They also, I think every other kid believes they're going to be an influencer, and that's the career of choice. Like that's really a going career, that when we talk about different careers, and they all think that's a good, viable career. That and business, they're going to sell, they're going to do something online that's just going to make them millions. So I don't know.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Wendy?
Yeah, well, I'll take Sharon's one step backwards even further. My son, in his modifications, he had trouble writing things down, and he got even up to all levels of his education for them to let him do his presentations orally. So he'd come in with a stack of books, and everything is like bookmarked and tagged, and he'd give his little oral presentation. And at the end, without hesitating, every single teacher or professor always said, well, we sure couldn't get you for plagiarism. Because, like she said, with it being in front of you in the classroom, it's right there. Like, you can't cheat. You can't use somebody else's ideas. You're right there in the moment. So that's even taking it one step back in technology.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up now. I really appreciate all of your comments, and this is a field that, yeah, is going to change so much every month, every year going forward. We're not going to hardly recognize, I don't think, our world in many ways in the future. But it's coming back to just, to wrap it up, I really do think that there is something about human interaction and that has to be preserved, and that we have to find ways of making sure that even our young people grow up believing in the importance of human interaction. So how we're going to do that, I'm not so sure, but I somehow deep down, I just think that that's got to be like the deepest value, that, human beings are created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and that there has to be something there that is unique and special than any technology that we can come up with. But
you know that the camps are still amazing for that. The kids really do bond and need
they're to give up their phones and their computers and everything to go to camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And maybe I'll see some of you either on Shabbat or next week.